Listen carefully. This is the story of me, Salvador Dali, who turned madness into art and made a show out of it. At first, people didn't understand me, laughed at me, and said that you can't live on bread alone with art. Then the same people looked at my works with admiration, not understanding what was happening. I will shock you, challenge the world, break all the rules, and at the same time turn every crisis into a new spark for triumph. Around me are critics, enemies, those who wanted to stop me on my way. But it's all just part of the game. Leave your doubts behind. If you are ready, now you will see how a simple boy from Figueres becomes a legend, and you will understand. True success is born where madness meets courage. I was born in Figueres, a small town in Spain, and from the very beginning my life was not ordinary. As a boy I drew everything I saw, on the walls of my house, on old boards, on scraps of paper that came to hand. People looked at me with suspicion, and my father would say, "Salvador, you can't live on bread alone with art." I heard it all the time, and every time he said those words, something inside me ignited. I wanted to show the world that art could be more than just a picture on a wall. My first crisis came very early. I dared to show my first works at a local exhibition, and the reaction was brutal. Laughter, twisted faces, whispers from critics. "Weird," they said. And you know what? I also felt that they were right. They didn't understand that I saw the world differently. But instead of giving up, I realized one thing. If the world is not ready to accept your vision, you have to learn to make it unforgettable. Then I began to experiment even more boldly. I painted images that did not fit into any framework. Melted watches, surreal animals, landscapes that seemed to come from dreams. People looked at it and were amazed. Some laughed, some stopped, and could not take their eyes off it. For the first time I understood that art is not just paints on canvas. It is the ability to touch people, to make them feel something that they did not even suspect. And then she appeared, Gala, my future muse, my support. She believed in me when no one else did. And that was the first real victory. To have someone by your side who was not afraid of your eccentricity. Together we began to build a world where art knows no rules. But most importantly, I realized that a dream starts small, but with it you can take any risk. Even when people around you laugh, even when they say impossible, something inside me screamed, "You will do it. You will make the world see your madness and fall in love." And it was this belief in myself that became my first great weapon. My first crisis came sooner than I expected. I entered the Academy of Fine Arts in Madrid, full of ambition and my own ideas. But the world of the academy turned out to be cold and hostile. Professors looked at me with suspicion, critics questioned my work. "This is not art, this is madness," they said, and I felt every word of their bad reviews cut straight to the heart. But here's the strange thing. The more they tried to break me, the more I felt that I was living on my own path. They insulted me, laughed at my experiments, said that my surreal images were useless. I saw how some students hid their talents, afraid of criticism, and I, despite everything, painted even more boldly. I created paintings where clocks melted, landscapes turned into dreams, and faces distorted into strange masks. And you know what? The first reviews were cruel, but someone quietly whispered, "This guy knows something that we don't see yet." Then I met those who became my first allies, André Breton and other surrealists. They saw my madness and were not repelled, but rather fascinated by it. We began to discuss art, break the rules, climb where no one dared. But even among friends there were conflicts. Some envied my talent, some did not believe in my willingness to take risks. And here was the first real shock, my first public exhibition in Paris. I decided to do something crazy, show up at the opening in a strange suit, with a mustache sticking out in different directions, and declare that art is the madness that we carry in our hearts. The audience was divided instantly. Some laughed, some applauded, and some did not understand what was happening. This was the first lesson. To touch the world, sometimes you have to shock it, and only those who are not afraid to look strange win. The internal conflict was terrible, the feeling of loneliness, misunderstanding, criticism, and doubts that sharpened me from the inside. But each defeat made me stronger. I realized that you can't let the system dictate your value. You have to create your own place in the world, even if the path is crooked and there are many enemies around. It was a time when I learned one simple but deadly thing. If you are not afraid of failure, the world will begin to fear you. And it was here, in Madrid and Paris, amidst critics and early enemies, that Dali began to take shape, not just as an artist, but as a mad genius who knew that crises were not the end, but the fuel for great achievements. After the criticism and the first blows of fate, I realized one thing. There is no point in being afraid anymore. If the world is not ready for your ideas, you have to make it pay attention to them. And I began to experiment even more boldly. My art became loud, wild, and at the same time mysterious. I painted what only my imagination could see. Melted clocks, bizarre landscapes, faces merging with objects, animals with human features. And each new work was a challenge. I was beginning to be noticed. André Breton, the same man who had once considered surrealism a perversion, now saw in me a real strength. He became my ally, my first defender in the art world, who tried to break me. Together we formed a new movement, a new view of reality. The first exhibitions in Paris brought together people who did not know whether to applaud or shout madness, sometimes both at once. I quickly realized one thing. For your work to be remembered, you have to not only create it, but also present it in a way that no one could take their eyes off. And I started to create myself as a brand. The mustache, the costumes, the behavior in public, all this was part of a big game. People started recognizing me on the streets, whispering, "This is the weirdo who draws without rules." And you know what? I wanted them to whisper, because attention is the fuel for dreams. But even among those who seemed to be friends, there were conflicts. Some surrealists envied me, thought I was too bold, too theatrical. Some did not understand that the show I created around myself actually emphasized my art. There were quarrels, gossip, intrigues. Sometimes it seemed that everyone was against me. But I learned one important rule. Enemies are also part of the game. They make you move forward, make your steps more precise, and bold decisions even stronger. And here is the first real success. My work attracts the attention of critics who used to laugh. The audience stands in front of the paintings with their mouths open, and someone whispers, "This guy knows something that we don't understand yet." That's when I felt that I was on the right path. Art is no longer just a picture on the wall. It becomes a part of people's lives. These first steps forward were difficult, dangerous, and wildly exciting. I learned to take risks, to be frank, brave, and a little crazy. And it was at this time that my future identity began to take shape, not just as an artist, but as Dali, a man who would turn art into a show and his life into a legend. I realized that for my art to be felt by everyone, I had to become part of the show. Not just an artist in a studio, but a phenomenon. It was a risk. People might turn away, laugh, call me crazy. But I knew it was necessary. And I started to create myself as a brand. My mustache became a symbol. It stuck out in different directions, like a signal to the world. Here is someone who is not afraid to be strange. Costumes are not just clothes, but part of the story that I told every time I went out. At parties and receptions, I did strange, shocking things. I appeared in a golden mask, staged improvised performances among the guests, declared that art is not just paintings, but a life that you create yourself. And you know what happened? People started to get excited. Those who had previously misunderstood my work now spoke of me with admiration, and critics who had scoffed had to admit, this man had invented something new. I learned to use shock as a tool. Every scandal, every strange behavior brought attention, and attention turned into power. Gala, my muse, was there. She understood that every step I took was part of a big game. Her support gave me the confidence to take even greater risks, to create even bolder. Together we built a world where art and life merged, where paintings came to life through my behavior, through the scene I created myself. But the enemies were not asleep. Some among the surrealists and colleagues envied my success. Critics accused me of selling myself, not art. Sometimes it seemed that the whole world was against me. But I understood the main thing. Real art always provokes. If everyone agrees, then you are doing something wrong. The first truly major exhibitions at the international level confirmed my words. New York, London, Paris. People stood in front of my paintings with their mouths open. And then I felt, I am not just an artist. I am a phenomenon that cannot be ignored. Every gesture of mine, every painting, every shocking appearance became part of the legend. At that time, I finally understood. If you want the world to hear you, you have to not just create. You have to create a show, be brave, and ready to take risks. And that's how Dali turned art into a brand, and himself into an icon that no one will be able to forget. The world suddenly opened up to me, and it was a shock even to myself. Paris ceased to be a limit. Now New York, London, Milan became the stage for my paintings. People who had previously laughed at my ideas stood with their mouths open when I appeared at the openings of exhibitions in strange costumes, with mustaches that seemed impossible. I realized that art is no longer limited to the canvas. It lives in public space, in people's reactions, in their whispers. This man, he's crazy. But the real breakthrough came when I met Luis Buñuel. Cinema. The ability to transform surreal images into moving scenes was something new, scary, and incredible at the same time. We were working on Un Chien and a Lou, and the first frames made people scream, cry, applaud, and some left the hall in horror. It was then that I felt an incredible power. If you combine art and life, paintings and theater, cinema and show, you can make the world perceive your madness as genius. And then Gala appeared. Without her, nothing would have happened. She didn't just support me. She was my strategy, my muse, my compass in the chaos. Together we took bold steps that scared others, combining advertising and painting, creating performances in the crowd, organizing exhibitions where people could touch my works, breathe them, become part of my game. At the same time, the enemies were awake. The old critics raised their heads again, accusing me of selling myself, not art. Some tried to discredit me in the world of cinema. But I learned every day, criticism is not the end, but proof that you are doing something right, that you are pushing the boundaries. And the louder they shout, the stronger you become. The first major galleries in New York accepted my paintings as a sensation. People would stay at the openings for hours, discussing, arguing, taking photos, recording every gesture. I felt that my mission was not just to paint. I was creating a world where art and man merged into one. It was a time of triumph and great transformation. I was no longer just an artist from Figueres. I had become a phenomenon, a brand, a legend that could not be ignored. And although the difficulties remained, I knew that I had done the most important thing. The world saw me, understood me, and even loved my madness. The world applauded, but I couldn't breathe easy. Fame is not silence and comfort. It's constant noise, expectation, fear of being forgotten. I saw new artists striving to take my place, how critics began to question my methods. More show than art, they wrote. Sometimes I woke up in the middle of the night, feeling that the whole world might turn its back. But here's the hidden power. Each new threat forced me to look for new ways. I began to experiment with giant sculptures, performances, advertising. I created images that are impossible to forget, even if you want to. Sometimes I made shocking statements, appeared in a lobster costume, gave out strange autographs, organized live performances in galleries. It worked. People came back, discussed, argued, paid attention to me again. But the biggest challenge was inside. The fear of losing myself, of ceasing to be Dali, of ceasing to amaze. Each new work required courage. Each performance required a bit of courage. Sometimes I would break down, but then Gallo would remind me, "You are not just an artist. You are a phenomenon." These words saved me. The criticism from my colleagues was harsh. Some thought I was selling myself, that the show was distracting from the art. But I realized one thing. Real art is not limited to the canvas. It lives in people's heads, in their reactions. And if people discuss your work, argue, and even scold you, it means you are doing something right. Here, new allies emerged: photographers, filmmakers, collectors. They helped me push the boundaries, transforming my images into new formats: photos, films, live performances. The world became a stage, and I became the director, directing the emotions of the audience. And it was at this time that I understood the main thing. Fame is not only applause, it is a test that tests your resilience. Criticism, fear, competitors, all this can be turned into fuel for new achievements. Because Dali is not afraid to be strange. Dali is not afraid to take risks. Dali knows that true art is born where pain, fear, and courage meet. It was a period of transformation. I learned to use every crisis as a springboard, to make each new work even stronger, even more shocking, even more unforgettable. And that's how I stayed on top, without losing my identity and the mad genius I was known and loved for. Look, I've come a long way. From a boy in Figueres who was misunderstood to a man whose image, style, and paintings have become a legend. There have been many falls, criticism, laughter, intrigues, and enemies. There have been nights when I doubted myself, when I felt like the whole world was against me. But every crisis has become my fuel, every blow a lesson, every defeat a step towards victory. I learned one simple but deadly principle. True success is born where madness meets courage. When you take risks, when you go against the rules, when you do what no one else dared to imagine, that's when the magic happens. And I saw it in people's eyes, the excitement, the shock, the emotions that can't be put into words. My story is not just about paintings. It's about a show, about a brand, about how art can be a part of life, how to make people feel your passion. I learned to use every gesture, every appearance, every crisis as a tool. I learned to transform fear and criticism into energy for new achievements. And that's what made me not just an artist, but a phenomenon, a legend, a symbol of being yourself, even if the whole world is against it.